Rules Review Committee to order, please. We will start with item number 2, and that's public comment. And we don't have anyone available that unless Steve wishes to address the Rules Review Committee. No. We will move on. We'll move on to item number 3, approval of the minutes of the November 28th, 2023 Rules Review Committee meeting. And there was a note, Tasha just mentioned that we had a correction to the minutes that Supervisor Dickinson was actually not here at the meeting, and so that's been corrected. So what is your pleasure?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
In the past, we captured more of the discussion, like some of the summary of the items. This one did not.
Correct. I think what in discussion with Tasha, one of the things that was a consideration was the standardizing the minutes, and the minutes are not supposed to reflect the discussion. It's supposed to reflect official actions, and that's per WCA. Oh, Kim, please.
In addition, the meeting videos are now on our YouTube channel as well.
So the meeting is recorded and it's available. So if anybody wants to back up or review anything that was discussed in the committee, it's available. So I had told Tasha not to include that additional information, simply because it sometimes becomes a point of contention as to what somebody said or if somebody tries to characterize a discussion. And it's according to WCA, the minutes are supposed to reflect official actions.
I respectfully disagree with the interpretation. I would hope that we'd capture, we're trying to operate under consensus, and we didn't even capture the items that we talked to. And so what we're doing is we're deferring, in essence, to the recorded version of the minutes, which is not our policy, and would hope that we'd at least be able to capture an outline of what those topics were, just so we can go back. There's no, under this approach, the only way for you to know when an item was discussed, I guess you could go to the minutes, or the agendas, but the agendas aren't even inclusive. So there's no way of knowing without reviewing all of the tapes for all of the meetings when a topic was discussed. And I don't intend to support adoption of these minutes, and would ask that we have a little bit more embellishment going forward.
Okay. Kim, please.
My understanding is that the timestamp of the particular topic is in the minutes, so you can go directly to that section of the recording to listen to the discussion. That's what we've started doing for all other standing committees as well.
But to Supervisor Robinson's point, it only says that we just started the discussion on the rules at 1:13, so it doesn't say we discussed rule such and such, rule 14.2 or whatever the number of the rule be. Okay, so if those corrections were made to the minutes that we discussed starting at minute so and so, would that suffice? I'm asking for discussion.
From my perspective, I think it's important that we capture what the topics were, because again, the agenda is vague, the minutes are vague. Therefore, there's no way for anyone to know which minutes to go without having to go through all of the recordings of the committee.
Okay.
I would request that we at least capture the topics that were discussed at the meetings.
Okay. Do
I-
you,
I had one
Supervisor
thought.
Dickinson, go ahead.
Thank
please.
you. I would just look for consistency. We've been doing these meetings for months now, and now we're changing. And so I not being here, I guess if you're not here, yes, I can go back and watch the meeting and I can pick through and everything. I would just look for consistency, and that would be for anything that we're doing and any committee or anything. I certainly understand and appreciate the concerns that you had brought up, because we've talked about that before in other meetings, but I guess I'd just be looking for consistency. Thank you.
Okay. So what's your pleasure? You wish to motion to defer and have the additions that you're referring to put into the minutes and then brought forward for next.
I would move to defer for the purposes of revising the minutes to reflect the topics discussed.
Is there a second? And motion has been made and seconded to defer to the next month or next meeting, the minutes from the, let's see, November 28th meeting, and include the topics that were discussed. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to then the rules. I would like to try to get, we're down to probably, I went over with all of the items that were on the original list with Corp Counsel, and where his understanding was with all of the items, and we're down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 items really that need some additional clarification, and I'd like to try to get some of those finalized. Looking for the one, and I respectfully, Jake's always asked to be excused from this discussion, the ERC membership, and to reflect two things. One, get clarification on the Towns Association membership on the ERC committee, and then also the membership on the ERC committee as it relates to the FSA membership as the state statutes have changed. I think I reached out to CPZ staff to understand what their perspective was on the Towns Association membership. And so, because I wanted to get clarification and have it in the rules, how, a little more clarification. Was it supposed to be the representative that serves the Towns Association on the Towns Association Board of Directors? As it currently, well, I don't say there was the current member is that member, or is it supposed to be a representative from the Towns Association, Eastern or Western, and then is it supposed to be a representative from a town that has town zoning, county zoning, no zoning? And so I got the feedback, and their feedback was they did not need to have a representative. In fact, they were a little insistent that it shouldn't be a representative of the board if that the town's board of directors, if that individual is not from Marathon County. And so, and currently the town board, the Towns Association board representative for the eastern and western towns is not a Marathon County representative. So then I asked, well, do you want it, is it a recommendation then that you have a town that is county zoned or non-zoned or town zoned? And they didn't care. They said as long as it's a representative that's elected to the towns in and is a member of the Marathon County Towns Association, whether it be Eastern or Western. That was what, so then I posed the question, and they didn't care whether it would be the chair's recommendation, meaning the Marathon County Board Chair's recommendation, or do we seek the input from the two presidents of the Eastern and Western Towns Association, and they bring a name forward to represent the Towns Association? And so I throw that out for discussion. So I think the consensus was that it be a representative that serves town government, whether they are the Eastern or Western, and there was no distinction whether they were town zoned, county zoned, as long as, or on-zoned, as long as they represented town government. And so then really I think the only question would be, do we want somebody that the county board chair recommends, or the chair of the two Eastern and Western Towns Association? Jake, please.
Just request the abstention from discussion.
Granted. So what's the thoughts? No, Supervisor Seafield, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it should probably come from the presidents of the East and Towns, East-West Towns Association, and a person that, or a township that is not county zoned. I don't think it makes any difference, but if the person did come from, say, he's the chair of a township that does not have county zoning, you know, is it more benefit to have somebody from there to come and listen to what happens? Or, you know, it doesn't make any difference. But I think it should come from the Eastern Towns and Western Towns Association presidents, my opinion.
So we'd seek the input from the Eastern and Western Town chairs for the appointment process to appoint the individual to the ERC committee. Is there, and no preference as to whether that individual represent a town that's county zoned, town zoned, or unzoned? Is that the consensus? Thoughts? Supervisor Robinson?
I don't have any strong feelings. I think we've got a number of county supervisors that also have local experience. The concern that I have was when we require consultation with others is that those appointments are made quickly, and it puts another requirement in there. I think we're looking for that viewpoint, and the questions are, the question relative, if we look to the Towns Association, is there an implicit or explicit responsibility of that person then to go back to those towns associations and report what's going on from a zoning perspective? Or are we looking for them to bring the perspective of the local elected official to us? And I think in that case, it can be an appointment of the chair subject to confirmation by the board. If it is a reporting relationship, then Supervisor Seafeld's suggestion makes sense, but what are our expectations of that position?
I think that at least historically, I think it was to get the perspective at the committee level of the town, the local elected town officials. It wasn't a reporting relationship back to the Towns Association. So, other thoughts? Okay. Well, it's been suggested that we have the the chairs of the Eastern and Western bring a name forward, or it's also been suggested that the town or the county board chair make the appointment. Which way do you want? Administrator Leonard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm sure the committee has already considered this. I'm just pulling up the links from the existing rules to the state statutes. And as you know, each county board is required to have a land conservation committee. And the membership of that committee is provided by statute, specifically section 92.06 sub 1, and membership is under subsection B. And the ERC committee is designated to serve in the capacity of that land conservation committee. The membership requires that there be at least 2 members who are members of the Committee on Agriculture and Extension, so the Extension Committee, which is one of the kind of those cross relationships. The county shall have a person who is engaged in agricultural use as required under Section 91. There are members of the county board, and there are up to 2 members who are not members of the county board. So under 92.06, there doesn't seem to be a requirement for any towns association, and certainly the Farm Service
Correct.
rationale is there.
Correct.
But just wanted to make sure the committee was aware of that. I'll keep looking to see if there's any, I don't believe there's any statutory requirement for a town's.
No, that's always been Marathon County's practice. That has not been in state statute or a requirement in state statute. That was always been just a historic representation on the committee. Was again a Marathon County rule. The FSA member is also the rule. Those changes were clear that we wanted, and they were to reflect what the state statute said on the agricultural participant. Now, historically, there also, the FSA committee brought forward a name. In this case, I'm assuming you want the chair, Marathon County chair, just to make a recommendation to the full board for its consideration. An individual that meets the criteria as the state statute spells out, that has farm participation or farm.
Engaged in agriculture.
Engaged in
Our rules just requires that it reads the last phrase, and 1 Farm Service Agency member. Sorry to take you down that rabbit hole as well.
No, that's fine. So, consensus, thoughts? I think, again, one, that we had to have a farm participant be appointed by or recommended to the full board for consideration by the board chair, and then the town's association representative be an elected official from the Eastern or Western Towns Association. And that individual, again, in our rules, does not have voting authority, but it provides context and representation from the towns. The recommendation originally was to have, or was suggested to have, the Towns Association chairs bring a name forward. There's also been suggested that the county board chairman bring a name forward. Which do we? I'd like to have some clarifying or clarification so that the rules can be written the way we want them to reflect. Supervisor Robinson?
Current rules state that 1 representative of the county, or the Towns Association of Marathon County, appointed by the county board chair person. So it basically delegates that authority to the county board chair. I'm okay with that.
Is everybody okay with that? Okay. Lance, you got the, we're good? All right. Item 20 on the agenda was to provide more specifics on and uniformity around public comment. I think one of the things that we, struggle with as far as public comment is when we have multiple people that we have on our agenda, always specifically stated 15 minutes allowed for public comment. do we want to spell out in our rules that we will allocate 3 minutes to each individual for up to 3 minutes for public comment, to specify that? And the discretion of the county board chair to extend the period from 15 minutes to whatever is sufficient to allow each and every member of the public that wishes to address the board. I think that's what we're looking for as far as uniformity, especially when we have, multiple people where it's going to clearly exceed the 15-minute allocation. Thoughts? Supervisor Dickinson, please.
So the 3 minutes is something I think we should do, and the example I would have is there was one full board meeting where we had our 15 minutes, and there were 2 people who spoke. So they each were allowed 7.5 minutes, and that's a lot of time. And I believe there was another meeting when one person came and they spoke for 15 minutes, and that's a presentation. So it's not really a comment, so I would certainly be in line with the 3 minutes. As far as the amount of time, I was trying to look in the rules because I don't quite recall. The extension of time is at the board, at the chair's discretion. I know other boards will have where the board has to extend that through a vote. I don't have, it's just another suggestion, but for me, it's the 3 minutes should be applied to every person, up to 3 minutes.
Supervisor Robinson?
I think this one, the battery is draining and so is this just for the county board meetings or for committees? Are we adopting a uniform rule? And I'll just go back to my experience when I chaired the Board of Health, is we would routinely have multiple people speak, and many times it was not on topics on the agenda, but it was of topics within the purview of the committee, which is allowed. And what we would do, because we had people that had time limits on their ability, is we would go with 15 minutes, let them, relative to the speak, and then defer the other comments until the end of the meeting so that we could take action. So if it's a rule, because again, you've got limits on items on the agenda versus items within the purview. So I don't have a problem at all with the county board, but my concern is that you could potentially stack a meeting with 20, 25 speakers in an effort to delay because you lose your quorum of those people. So I would hope that there'd be some flexibility, particularly on items not on the agenda, but in the purview of that committee. So Mike, is this an all-inclusive or county board only?
I think we'd want to make it clear what our intent is. If our intent is that this rule applies to all public comment for the board and its subcommittees, then I think we should say that. And I think we can make that clear.
But I think your point is well taken. I think we do have a distinction that the distinction is that the county board meetings are subject to items that are germane on the agenda versus committees. They're germane to the jurisdiction of the committee. So I think we need to clarify what we want. But I think the consideration that Supervisor Dickinson brings up is accurate. That we've allocated by the agenda, we've allocated the 15 minutes, and so if we want consistency and say everybody is only allowed 3 minutes, then let's state that, and then the discretion of the chair. I don't have a problem if we throw the vote out to the board, or the discretion of the chair as far as extending the 15 minutes for depending on the number of people. Supervisor Robinson?
Have we ever not extended the 15 minutes at the county board level to allow all It's because we require them to register before the meeting, which is your limiter, but I'm not aware of any time where we've put an arbitrary time limit, so I don't have a problem at all with putting that 3-minute limitation on items for the county board. I think we want to give some thought as to how we might apply this to committee, commissions, boards.
Yeah, I don't recall ever limiting the extension of the time past the 15 minutes when more individuals have registered to sign up. We've allocated up to 3 minutes for each individual, especially when there's more than 5 that have signed up, and allowed the extension to time to go past the 15 minutes. Thoughts on committee? Supervisor Dickens, please.
So I think when it comes to committees, what you have is, I mean, we always talk about this, the work is being done in the committee, right? I mean, this is the place. So there's I think the public comment that you tend to find in those for the most part is directed around the jurisdictional kind of thing. And if we restrict just to an agenda item as an interpretation, I think that would kind of crush down the ability of the committee to really be hearing the people who should be coming to them.
Mm-hmm.
So, for lack of a better phrase, so, and I understand that can be. This is always a discussion when it comes to public comment about whether it should be on the agenda, or similarly, if someone, a non-resident, right, could speak. So I would be careful about that language for standing committees.
Yeah, I don't think the intent was to limit the discussion or public comment. I think our rules clearly state right now that it's open to anything under jurisdiction of the committee. But I don't think that we want to open that to the county board. I think we want to keep, we intentionally tried to narrow the rules so that at the county board level, the public comment was exclusively on agenda items rather than the county board's roll over everything. Supervisor Robinson?
The issue becomes the timing of the public comment. If you front-end load the public comment and you've got a quorum issue, it could be that the issues that are not on the agenda result in your failing to have the public comment. In all cases, the Board of Health accepted all public comments, but in some cases deferred some of those comments from the beginning of the meeting to the end of the meeting so that the business portion of the meeting could take place while you had a quorum. And again, many times those comments were they were on the issues of jurisdiction, but not on the issues on the agenda. So I don't know if we would want to differentiate and have a two-tiered, if needed, a two-tiered approach on those issues on the agenda initially, and if there's not adequate time, to allow for public comments on those things within the jurisdiction of the committee. And then if there were quorum issues, you could act, but the hope would be is that you'd be able to hear all those comments. But there are times where you've lost physician members on the Board of Health.
But if you're losing a quorum, can you really be taking public comment? I guess that would be a question I would ask Corp Counsel. So Committee X takes, as John's pointing out, 15 minutes of public comment and reserves after the business portion of the committee takes action on all of the agenda items and then opens it up for public comment again, but loses the quorum at that point. The committee has to adjourn, but can they continue to take public comment?
So the advice from my office, for me and my predecessor, has always been as soon as you lose a quorum, the meeting should be over. You shouldn't be continuing in any fashion. That would continue to be my advice in that situation.
Okay. Supervisor Longhorn, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple things. First of all, I really like how it's currently set up in our rules where with county board public comment, it has to be something on the agenda, and then at the standing committee, it has to be an area of jurisdiction. I really like how that's set up. I wouldn't favor changing any of that. I would be in favor of the 3-minute limit for county board public comment, as well as standing committees, to make it uniform between the two. You know, in my committee, we've had some contentious hearings with a couple different topics over the course of the past 5 or 6 years. And to be honest, even in the most heated public comment environments, I've never seen public comment go more than 3 minutes. It very, very rarely goes over 2 minutes if we're actually looking at it on as a timing issue. So I would be supportive of 3 minutes for county board and the standing committee. And the other thing I was going to add to Mike's previous point, the meeting should cease, but there's nothing to stop that non-quorum from sitting in those seats and continuing to listen to the public if they wanted to continue to speak. It's just that it wouldn't be as part of the meeting.
That's correct, legally. There's always the concern about you're listening to public comment, but then are you starting to talk about what you hear? Is that creating an issue? So that's why my advice and Scott's advice and everyone's advice has always been stop the meeting and disperse because of the dangers of having that large a member of, even if it's not a quorum, that large a number of members of the committee present listening to something that's germane to the committee.
Yeah, and I'm in no way advocating for that. I was just pointing out there's nothing stopping those people from doing that. The quorum issue, I hear where Supervisor Robinson's coming from. I just think that's a separate thing. That's tangentially related to accepting public comment and how I think the words that were used were front loaded, how that can create a lot of time constraints. But if I was in a situation like that, as a chair, I would just call a special meeting a couple days later, or if you know it's going to be a contentious topic, you have a meeting just for accepting the public comment and you have the business portion of it later. So like I said, I hear what's being said. I don't know if that's something that you can solve with a public comment rule. So those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Supervisor Hart, please.
Thank you. And how I'm hearing this conversation, we already kind of have a two-tiered system in which public comment, the germaneness depends on if you're speaking to the full board, if you're speaking to the committee. So with that, I think it'd be a good idea to have the 3-minute limit for both. But what my concern is at the committee is you could have members of the public try to prevent committee from conducting business by having a wave of public comment. And then if you lose quorum towards the expected end of a committee, well, then the committee doesn't finish its business. And that could be a way of obstructing how the government operates. So I think to mitigate that, we could still have a 15-minute, it could be 3 minutes per speaker, up to 15 minutes, and then public comment after that would go to the end of the meeting. That would be my suggestion.
Administrator Leonard, please.
I was going to offer I know you have about 6 other items to get through, that staff could bring something back for you to react to. And I think it's, I was kind of leaning toward that same idea that we could structure something initially that kind of adds in the 3-minute per speaker limitation while still keeping a 15-minute general rule, while also still keeping the flexibility of the chair of the respective committee or board to extend as reasonable. But regardless, we can draft something and then have you react to it and make changes. Your current rule does have a fair amount, I think, as all of you have referenced, a fair amount of flexibility. So we can, if there are other thoughts that you have about things to try to incorporate, that would be great. But I think we can at least try to capture these comments.
Okay, Supervisor Longhorn, and then
So the
Dickinson.
comment there would be, that's what the chair or the board, that committee decides on. If they know they have to leave in an hour, they know they have to get work done, the limitations for the public comment could then be done within that 15-minute rule, not extending the 15 minutes. So there really is no need for anything beyond that, if that makes sense, right? I mean, if you, because you understand what I'm saying? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I get your point.
Just the
Absolutely.
discretion of the moment.
Right, okay. All right. All right, well then, we'll have staff draft something and bring it back with the supported the changes that we were talked about. Okay, we'll move back. So we have reimbursement. We haven't had that. The reimbursement expense process is still being looked at, and we're going to bring that back as soon as we have some consensus with finance. Recording, one of the things that we didn't have 100% clarity around was recording of all meetings and whether or not we're going to require all meetings and all subcommittee meetings be recorded. And I think the clerk is now we're recording more of the meetings, but I don't know that we are required right now currently to record all of our subcommittee meetings. So that was a request. In the challenge, there were some challenges that were around that that were discussed a little bit. That being, they become a public record, the length of time of retention being 7 years, so what's the will of the committee as far as all of the standing committee meetings are published live now. NCHC meetings are being recorded, and in some cases, multiple other meetings are being recorded and provided to the public. What is the will of the committee? Supervisor Dickinson, please.
So I did have one question about the public retention law. For example, for school boards, audio and video recording, there is no requirement. There is no retention requirement under the statute. And that was in March 2023 that was published. I don't know if, and it's just something I'm aware of because it's a discussion that we're having in our own school board. Do we know what do we have the exact statute that talks about the public records retention of video?
So there's a general public records law statute that presumes public records have to be retained for 7 years unless there's a different statute that says otherwise. I don't believe there's a different statute that specifies something different for meeting recordings. So then the presumption is that there's a 7-year retention period.
So it's something for clarification to understand whether, where we're going to retain the record, whether it's going to be on the website, whether it has to be retained within a vault, and then someone asks for it and you can give it to them, because that plays into a lot of what we're discussing here. The second thing is, I think we get a little, when we start getting into subcommittees and all this, we're really getting, in my opinion, we're really getting down into important discussions, obviously, but more low-level discussions that will bubble themselves up to committee. And so those recordings are at the committee level. I think we're opening ourselves up for a lot of work and a lot of record retention and legal question. And so wrapping my head around this discussion over the past couple of months, I don't see where it rises to the level that it has to be done.
I would agree with those comments. Other thoughts? Supervisor Hart, please.
I think, and just from a point of clarification from a clerk, it all depends on what the purpose of the recording is for. So clerks have the ability to record meetings in order to accurately reflect the minutes, and I believe that they're only required to keep those recordings for, I think it's 90 days, and that's only for the purpose of creating the minutes. And once the minutes are done, then you can delete the recording. But there is a distinct difference between that and recording a full meeting that's meant to go out to the public, which I believe that one is the 7 years one.
That's absolutely right.
So you could have meetings that are recorded, just the people who are at that meeting aren't aware of that recording, what the purpose of that recording is for.
Supervisor Robinson?
Well, on the other side, in terms of transparency, based upon the minutes that were presented today, there would be because of how it was worded, would that constitute a 7-year record or a 90-day record for the recording of the last meeting of the rules review?
My understanding of the recording is that it was not utilized solely for the purpose of creating the minutes, so it would be a 7-year retention.
But plus, I think the minutes reflect timestamp of.
So those, in those
discussions
cases, they
would require a 7-year.
So how we take minutes determines what our policy is.
There is a direct relationship, yes, I would say.
Is Mr.
So,
Oh, go
so
ahead.
I think it's a broader, there's a broader issue of how are we taking minutes for what purpose and how are we reflecting those? And I would ask staff to perhaps go back and review how we're keeping minutes, what their form is, and then so we can have an understanding of what we're doing, because we're basically moving in a direction of recording all meetings and keeping those for 7 years, in whether intentional or not, by how we're presenting the minutes.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And so, Administrator Leonard, you had an input, or you had a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to, I think this is a great discussion, and there is that interrelationship. My only comment with respect to minutes is we have again, it matters what body is meeting and what their purpose is and what's the level of detail required by statute for their minutes. The level of detail required for some of the actions that our committees take is different than the standard rule that was alluded to before, that the Wisconsin Counties Association has commented on. And I defer to Mike on this, but for the Board of Adjustment, we take different types of minutes, and for zoning decisions, different types of minutes, because we need to capture different information required by statute. That's my lawyer in recovery recollection of that statute. I haven't looked at it in a while, but as opposed to the general requirements we have for and how we approach other minutes. But we can bring you back if there's a desire for some specific information. Certainly we can do that. And a template regarding minutes, I think, is always a good thing.
Okay, other discussion? Other discussion. So we'll have staff bring us back some recommendations on some clarifications on recordings. And unfortunately, I think we are losing our quorum. I'm not a voting member.
Oh, Jake.
Oh, Jake's on the phone. Okay. We're good. We're good. We're good. So as soon as Jake comes back, we'll have the quorum back. So we'll be in recess till Jake returns. Sure. No. turn. Recess is over. So one thing I wanted, one of the other additional things that we didn't have 100% clarification on or come to consensus on was creating a rule that 3 committee members can direct the chair of a committee to put an agenda item on the agenda. And if we understand the current rule and the current process, the current rule and current process is if a board member requests something to be put on a agenda or an item, if they bring that to the chair of the board is required to disseminate that to a standing committee. May not be the standing committee of request, but it's the standing committee of jurisdiction as viewed by the chair. So, or it could be multiple committees. But then that committee must put that item on the agenda. This rule, if I understand the intent of that, or at least around the suggestion, is that 3 members of a committee can uniformly get together and decide they want an item on their committee of jurisdiction, so they happen to be in ERC. So 3 committee members of ERC goes to the chair of ERC and says, I want this on the agenda. The way I understand, then the chair of ERC would be required to put that on the agenda. Again, this rule was written the way it was to not hamper anyone from bringing anything to the board or to a committee. It was designed to not require or not allow committee shopping. It was designed to not was designed to prevent items from reoccurring on the agenda multiple times after a decision was made. So again, we wanted clarification. I don't know that we came to a consensus last time. Again, I think the way the rule currently works does not prevent anything from appearing before a committee, because it has to, if it's brought in writing to the chair of the board, it is required to be disseminated to a committee, and if that committee does not provide satisfaction to the individual requesting it, they can request that it be put on the executive committee agenda and discussed by the executive committee. So, for example, an item is brought to the chair, disseminated to ERC. ERC takes it up but says, nope, we're not taking any further action. The individual that made the request to the chair can then say, I want it being discussed by executive committee. It's then put on the executive committee agenda and discussed by the executive committee. And if it doesn't go out of the executive committee, then it cannot be brought to the full board. That was, I think, what the premise around the way the rule was written originally, or the way the rule is written currently. So, thoughts? Supervisor Dickinson.
The only thought I had about it is, I guess the intent of a change is to empower committee members to feel like they're being heard, to get an issue heard, right? So I think I'd made the comment a couple meetings ago is, as long as you have that step-through process that's real clear, that can happen, that there's always that opportunity for that to happen. I'm comfortable with that language. This isn't to say that there are standing committee chairs necessarily, or executive or standing committee chairs or county board chair, or someone who's purposefully acting with an intent to not get something heard. I'm just trying to think of how do you empower board members so that each board member is in equal standing
Exactly.
to get an issue they feel heard on the table for consideration. So however that happens, I'm comfortable with, kind of like, almost like that last thing, like hitting that, that red button at the end to say, no, the standing committee chair shut me down, the county chair shut me down, but we're still going to be able to talk about it.
Other discussion? I think the other thing that the proposed potential change does potentially create is a walking quorum issue. So the way it's, if you look at the actual narrow intent or the narrow description of the rule, it says 3 committee members can bring. I talked to 3 committee members. One of them said, no, I didn't want to bring it to the committee. So now I go to a 4th person on that committee and discuss the agenda item to be brought on the agenda. So I've got the 3 committee members. So now the 3 committee members, we've actually involved 4 committee members making the discussion about bringing the item on the agenda. That's where I think we walk down that road that potentially gets us into a walking quorum issue, whereas the current rule, any member of the board brings an item to the chair. It's not the chair's discretion whether that item gets sent out to a committee. It has to be sent out to the committee. And so I think to Supervisor Dickinson's point, and it's spot on, it's not to impede anyone's request to have an item heard by a committee or discussed at a committee level. I think the rule is written to empower each board member to be able to do that and not hamper it. But I think if we write the rule the other way, we potentially encourage or could find ourselves specifically creating a situation where we create a walking quorum issue. So, thoughts? Leave the rule as it is? Administrator Leonard, please.
Just a potential suggestion, and it's not relative to the policy, but perhaps there's an opportunity to reword the existing rule in a way to capture the point I think everyone is making, that every individual supervisor is empowered to get an item on an agenda, to make that more clear. Because as is sometimes the case, the more lawyers you have involved in writing a rule, sometimes it gets a bit cumbersome in its read. But to get at the point that every member of the county board is empowered to get items on agendas in a timely fashion. If nothing else, if there's a desire for change in process, certainly that's a different thing. But if there is the desire to, if nothing else, word it in a way that it more clearly captures that intent of the ability to get items on the agenda, we can take a crack at doing that.
Okay. Other thoughts? Any other thoughts on that item? Okay. Okay. The budget process, adding the budget process, well, the executive committee is going to take that item up for discussion tomorrow. I think we will get feedback from the executive committee as to what worked well, what didn't work well, and then we will have a preliminary draft of that for our next committee meeting. So then we are down to an item is the chairperson's guidelines and expectations per the list. And then also one item is I think we want clarification because I think because our rules say the chair and the vice chair are ex officio members. Is the vice chair also ex officio member or just the chair?
I think it's just the chair. I believe it's just the chair.
Okay, so the chair is an ex officio member of of every meeting or every committee, and so our historic precedent has been that that person not be allowed to vote. So even though he's an ex officio member, is not allowed to vote. He's allowed to discuss, but the question, he's not then allowed to make any motions if he's not allowed to vote.
That's been our historic practice.
Okay. So I just want to know, do we want some specific clarification in our rules saying that specific thing? And then the other items was the expectations and whether or not the chair can be or, well, I think the clarification that we decided around was we could exclude the committee, the chairperson of the board from being the chairperson of NCHC by not appointing him to NCHC, but I don't think that we have the ability to limit NCHC from electing a member of the NCHC board to be the chair of the NCHC board. Does that make sense? So if the chair of the Marathon County Board is appointed and approved by the board to the NCHC board, then the NCHC board has the authority of electing its own chair. But I don't know that, and I refer to the lawyers, can this board prohibit that member of the NCHC board from being the chair?
No, I think this board could prohibit its chair from being considered for nomination to the NCHC board, but once that nomination occurs, it's up to that body to select its own chair, and it's not governed by our rules. I had one other comment on the ex officio discussion. So I think part of the reason this came up is actually in Robert's rules, ex officio members are entitled to vote and make motions. That hasn't been our historic practice, but we don't have a rule on it. So when our rules say, in absence of a specific rule, Roberts governs, which suggests to me that ex officio members should be able to vote and make motions. But if that's not the wish of the body, we should create a rule. And if we are comfortable with what Roberts says, then we should follow what Roberts says.
Right. I think that's why I put it in the voting rights of an ex officio member on the discussion. I think there's two things, really three things under the chairperson's guidelines is one, the NCHC executive committee, membership, voting rights as an ex officio member, and then any other roles or responsibilities that the chairperson has under the chairperson's guidelines. Supervisor Longeland, please.
Oh, I just want to take a quick side path though, because I want to understand what Mike just said. So you're telling me, Mike, that the chair or the vice chair could go to a solid waste committee meeting and make motions and vote on matters? Is that what you're saying?
That's what Roberts says. And it's the chair, the vice chair is not an
Vice
ex
chair
officio
isn't.
member.
Ex officio, but the chair is.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Dickinson, please.
So I'm going to look at Mike too. And so Robert's rules help clarify this. So without exception, ex officio members of the boards and committees have exactly the same rights and privileges, which is what you stated. There are, however, two instances in which ex officio members are not counted in the quorum, the number for quorum, whether it's, or determining that or whether it's present. And one of the instances is in the case of the president, whenever the bylaws provide that the president shall be an ex officio member of all committees. Is that kind of what we're doing here?
That is what we're doing here, and that's why the chair is not considered in the quorum count.
Okay.
However, the chair is still, under Roberts, allowed to make motions and vote.
Okay, which seems a little strange.
I don't disagree with you. Which is, I think, why our historic practice has been
Not to.
the chair doesn't do that, because it seems strange. But when you really read what Roberts says, the chair could do that. So I think it's important that, like the calling of the question discussion that we've had, if we have a historic practice, but we don't have a rule about it and it conflicts with Roberts, we probably should consider making a rule about it if we want it to continue to be our practice.
Supervisor Dickinson?
Then I would just put into language the way it is now. It would be, ex officio doesn't have the voting privileges.
Whichever is, whatever the suggestion is of this committee, absolutely. Move it forward to the full board for consideration.
The other thought is, if our expectation is that the chair not have the ability to vote and make motions, why are we having the chair be an ex officio member of all committees? Because that's really the only reason you would want that. So that could be a solution, is remove that from the chair's duties and responsibilities.
Just to add to that, because you do have a rule that says every member of the county board can go to any committee and has the ability to be recognized and speak. So to Mike's point, perhaps it's
The simple
redundant.
solution is, I think what we're saying is the simple solution is remove the ex officio member title to the chair of the board. It eliminates the ability or the confusion because the side rule says that every board member can attend it. So,
So I'm now-
Administrator Leonard.
Within the span of 3 minutes, I'm going to disagree with myself, more like 30 seconds. It must be an attorney. It just occurred to me that the only, the potential benefit of having that is what you're all doing right now, is that Chair Gibbs's previous selection by this committee to serve as the chair in the absence of the existing chair. Kicking that back to Mike to see if that makes sense, because you wouldn't otherwise be able to, it needed to have been one member of the actual committee, but I don't know if that's a benefit or not. Sufficiently a benefit to keep the ex officio language with the clarification that they don't vote or count to quorum.
Yep, that's a good point. That I don't think could have happened if the chair wasn't an ex officio member of all committees, but that's a question, is whether that's a reason to keep it or not. I don't know.
Supervisor Lionhan.
So do we currently have a quorum?
Yes, 4.
Yes, we have 4.
Oh, Cody's here. Yeah, sorry. Hey, Cody.
You-
Yes, we didn't, while you stepped, that's why we were in recess while you stepped out. So what's the pleasure of the committee? Supervisor Robinson.
I would support Chris's suggestion that we limit, allow them to be ex official, but then limit their the ability to vote based on past practice for the very reason that we've had, the discussion we just had. It's rare, unique, but there are benefits associated with that if we eliminate it, we may have unintended consequences.
I have a follow-up question, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
So, in addition to the chair being an ex officio member of all committees, et cetera, specific to the Board of Health, the medical director of the health department is an ex officio member of the Board of Health. So are we intending a rule to apply to all ex officio members that they can't vote, or just to the county board chair?
Supervisor Robinson?
My experience when I was on the Board of Health is that they never voted.
And
So
actually, I'm looking at the rule, and it says that they can't vote in the rule about that ex officio member. So perhaps I can just take that language and apply it to the chair.
Duplicate. Okay, so we have that portion of the chair's guidelines and expectations and ex officio members decided, recommend to the full board for consideration. What about the, on the NCHC board? We just follow what the understanding is, that the board still can eliminate, or do we put it in our rule that they can't be a member of the NCHC committee? Or do we just say the board, in its discretion, can decide to, if the recommendation comes forward from the administrator, because the NCHC committee appointments are the administrators, that the board can then discern and reject those like they can any other appointment? What's Supervisor Dickinson?
The only thought that crosses my mind is language, our language that would say regarding being the chair of the NCHC would be basically to say to turn down an appointment. So if someone says, so our recommendation is that that the chair would not be. And so if someone were to make that appointment on the board, you would then decline. That person would decline. If unless there was kind of like no alternative kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I don't know that we can write in the rules that we can require somebody to decline an appointment, can we?
Well, that's what I was saying is like a recommendation, the recommendation would be that this board is saying to that chair, do not put yourself in a position to do more than necessary or something like that. I think you understand what I mean. Just a thought.
Thank you. Other discussion?
I don't have, the issue is, do we, are there limitations on the chair for an entity outside of ours? I think that the candidate for county board chair could declare whether or not they wanted to or had an interest in doing that as part of their candidacy for county board chair. And there may be situations where we want that. I'm comfortable with the current rules or the silence on that issue.
Supervisor Dickinson, please.
Is there pay associated with being on NCHC at all?
Well, the NCHC offers a $50 stipend for each member attending the meetings. I rejected or refused to accept that $50 stipend because I'm, in my view, appointed by this committee to serve that committee as a representative of this board, and don't feel that that's appropriate. Now, I do get reimbursed mileage, but I also don't submit those miles that I'm reimbursed by NCHC to the county, so there's not a duplication. But that's just my.
Yeah, I don't. My comment before is just trying to figure out a way to help get to a place. I don't really have a strong position on this either way. In the guidelines, the thing that I brought up before is I just want to make sure that our county chair isn't so stretched with time and commitments where it can make it very difficult to kind of find persons who might be interested in that position. So other than that, that's all I got.
And yeah, I guess I would say, this about it's still the will of the board as to whether or not to appoint and approve the appointment to the NCHC board. And so, then when the individual is on the NCHC board, it's up to that individual if they're nominated as the chair or vice chair or whatever, whether they want to accept it. So it's not a requirement. I think that's the clear distinction. Supervisor Hart, please.
Thank you. And I think another important part of this discussion is that our current chair is appointed as a member of the county board, not as the chair of the county board. And I know Chair Gibbs also serves on the Finance Committee as a member of the board and not as the chair of the board. And I think that's an important distinction to make when allowing a supervisor to equally have the right to serve on a committee, just as any other member of the board would be able to. And I think limiting one supervisor's ability to serve on a committee isn't the right thing to do just because the supervisor also is the chair of the full board. We all have different appointments in different positions, and just limiting someone's ability to serve just because they also serve in a different capacity, I think, isn't right either.
Supervisor Dickinson, please.
The chair is the only position that has 2-page document in addition to a full page within the code. So 3 pages of additional responsibilities that not the average board member has. Thanks.
Okay, any other discussion on those? I would look to Corp Counsel. Do we have clarity? I think the consensus is that we're leaving it and leaving the rule as it is, and the board still has the discretion of approving the appointment to the NCHC board, but with the understanding that if they approve the appointment to the NCHC board, that removes the authority to control what title or what position they hold on the NCHC board. Does that make sense? I guess I'm seeing silence is golden. Okay. All right. Recording guidelines, adding the budget, creating a rule for 3 committees. I don't have anything else unless there's any other discussion on agenda items. We've got some items that we'll be bringing back and then reviewing the whole list, going through those as the rules are rewritten. So we're looking for feedback yet on reimbursement, on public comment, recording, and the interplay between minutes, and then the budget process will be the additional items that will be coming back for review, and then review of the total overall rules. Any other discussion? Any other items? All right. Then we are future agenda items. I think we just looked at them. There will be, again, the reimbursement expense process, the public comment, clarification, recording of meetings, and the interplay between minutes and the budget process, and then the overall total set of rules that we have and the grammar in those. So with that, we are down to the adjournment. Supervisor Langenau with the motion, Supervisor Robinson with the second to adjourn. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone.